Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Lori, and welcome to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. This podcast fosters curiosity and understanding about neurodiversity while empowering individuals with tools for acceptance and inclusion in classrooms, the workplace, and communities. Featuring shared stories of neurodiverse life experiences, it sheds light on navigating a world not designed for diversity. Universally Unique starts now. Hi, this is Dr. Lori. Welcome to Universally Unique, a show that I have been co-hosting with Dr. Pat for the past 3 episodes. And today we have a very special guest with us. We have Chyenne Giarnese, who is an individual who is living her life as a very exciting, very interesting, very thoughtful, neurodivergent individual who has a very interesting kind of way of looking at the world. Chyenne is trained as an APRN. She has an interest in looking at things from a functional medicine perspective, and she has a number of different little projects that she has started that I think have the potential to be quite powerful, not only for folks within the neurodiverse world, but for folks outside of that world. So we're going to start with a couple of breaths, and then we're gonna get going with Chyenne. So we'll take 3 box breaths together. We're going to breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. 3 breaths is usually all you need to kind of reset. So Chyenne, what I'd like to start with is for you to just give us a little bit of background about yourself. I know that your K-12 education was one that probably one might like to forget pieces of. And I know that there was a period of time where you did not quite know all of the things that were going on with you. So that created some challenges. So maybe you give us a little quick history of that and then kind of let us know how you've come to where you are, how it is that you're figuring the world out from the lens you were looking at it through before, but now perhaps having a name for that.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited, especially listening to your episodes. It's really a blessing for sure. Well, like you said, I'm a nurse practitioner. School for me was very unique, just kind of doing it and not really having the support because I wasn't diagnosed until my early 20s. So kind of really started between like 20 and 22. I would say prior to that, I had a lot of those like accessory symptoms with just like anxiety and depression and kind of disorderly eating that was just always said like, you're just a girl. And I think a lot of times it brought a lot of confusion and just kind of almost like I was trying to be a troublemaker growing up, not on purpose. And I think I was just having a hard time and I really didn't know how to express it. So, being able to get diagnosed, even though it was kind of shocking at first, like you said, really did give me just a better understanding. And then I think from, being diagnosed to here, being, I'll be turning 33 this year, it was kind of just like relearning myself as there isn't something wrong with you. You're just a little different. And the way you can get through life is still amazing. It just is a little different, and that's okay.
I would suspect that finally knowing why you were operating in the world the way that you were was probably a surprise, as you said, but also a relief that I know what it is. So now I know where to go. And if you're comfortable sharing, would you share with our listeners what your diagnoses are?
Absolutely. It was definitely a relief. I guess I had a lot of accessory diagnoses before I ended up with my final one, which was autism spectrum disorder. I was actually originally diagnosed with Asperger's, but then they kind of phased that term out. And I'm sure many people kind of know just from like the history of that gentleman and kind of some of the activities that Hans, was ended up being with. So they switched it over into the DSM-5 from autism spectrum 1 through 3. So I got bumped into one, not needing as much support, but just being on my spectrum self. Previously, I had things like in high school, it was like anxiety, depression. I had an eating disorder, we'll say, all these ones. They even ended up kind of trying to say that I had like, borderline personality disorder and like ADHD, OCD. So I got all of these diagnoses before I finally got my final one. And when you finally like look at it, you're like, oh wow, those are just all symptoms of an overarching diagnosis, which was really helpful. But at that time, I would say, given 10, 12 years ago, it definitely was not as accepted as it is now. There is such a better acceptance towards people and just being different that wasn't so the case when I was getting diagnosed. So even though I was happy and relieved, there was definitely a stigma to it for sure.
And I think, especially women who intellectually are functioning at a higher level, it's oftentimes overlooked and gets put into all of the categories pretty much that you listed.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that could be overwhelming too, because again, when you just start collecting all these labels, it really is hard to identify like you're not broken. And I think that's what a lot of people I see struggle with these days or other people. It's not that there's anything bad or wrong, it's just different.
Exactly. And I think that's really the key. And in all reality, we all look at the world from a different perspective. Nobody could possibly say they know exactly what somebody else
Mhm.
is thinking or how they're feeling. And if we would just sort of generalize that to everyone, it could probably make many lives much, much simpler. So I know from this, though, you've really channeled a lot of your energy into trying to figure out why there's a gap there for women and, within ADHD, which oftentimes is a partner of folks on the autism spectrum. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing to try to assist women in that and who are in that situation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had quite the go at it. One of my uh I will say one of the most profound autism qualities that I have is my ability to really have this like core values that like leads me towards fighting for vulnerable populations. So yes, women on the autism spectrum 100% falls into that category. Some of the more exciting things was just kind of finding out what type of alternative therapies would be better for myself because once I got diagnosed, like you said, I got slapped in the face with saying like, "You don't look autistic."
Yeah.
Uh, then that just like created an entire other whirlwind of after just getting diagnosed and going through all of this, I was like, "Wow, well, maybe I'm not." And then it took me a long time, and I'd be like, "No, I'm probably not." And she's like, "No, Cheyenne, you definitely are." Um, so I think from that, I tried to learn as much as I can, and I was kind of doing a lot of education and there actually was working on getting my doctorate at St. Joe's and studying the traits and even trying to just bring more awareness to how it looks like on a female versus a male because there are some differences that are like stereotypical like for women rocking back and forth and playing with your hair aren't things that are typically those are just like girly things instead of like block lining and really enjoying like cars and things like that. And I'd say a big pattern for me was like how much I love my job and like just helping people and learning. Like I would say my special interest is so profoundly like what I do and having to like figure out the human body. So some of that stuff came up with just like how to treat our bodies and how a lot of people on the autism spectrum have a lot of genetic susceptibilities that put them at risk for not detoxing as well as other people. So how we care for our body can really add up. And a lot of times some people aren't really well versed, specifically traditional doctors, on how we should care for our bodies the best and like what health means, even for non neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
But I think it's almost more imperative for neurodivergent people to know how to care for their bodies in a way that will build health.
Um, in an earlier episode, Dr. Pat and I were talking about how there are many folks who are in the neurodivergent world who have also kind of joined the ranks, unfortunately, of folks with addictions, because they just don't quite know how to be in the world, and it just seems like that looks like a way to get in there, and then it turns out that that doesn't work out so well. And it, interesting as you're saying that they don't detox things well, it really makes you wonder whether folks on the spectrum process drugs and alcohol differently than everyone else too.
Yeah,
There's your next study.
yeah, right. For sure. And again, we're just all so unique, and I
Yeah.
think those things just matter a lot, and like that can be from just spending time in nature,
Mhm.
spending time alone, caring for your body with the types of food you eat. I know in my circumstance, avoiding, specific processed foods and even like highly sprayed foods has been really imperative as far as like some of those other accessory uh illnesses, we'll say, like the stomach issues, the asthma allergy triads that you sometimes see in people also diagnosed on the spectrum. So I think those have
Yeah.
been pretty valuable in helping me, as well as using, CBD and THC. I mean, realistically, last year I did sit in front of the board and had medical marijuana or cannabis approved for autism spectrum disorder in the state of Connecticut, which was pretty exciting. I know they wanted me to go back and actually advocate for children, so I have to like add that to my list of things to get
Yeah.
onto.
Yeah, and I mean, I think finding more natural approaches is so important because many folks within that community, not just folks who are on the autism spectrum, but folks with ADHD and all of the extra secondary things that like to come along, the depression, the anxiety, gastrointestinal issues, end up on so many different medications trying to address symptoms, and then it becomes a snowball.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a
Um,
question too. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something, I want to go back to it. Each You can't put everybody in a box. Dr. Noto, you and I talked about this before. We like to take people and put them in a box as if all ADHD people were the same and all autistic people, and we're not. And so you go on a journey, and my diagnosis is probably different than yours. At first, I was part of the, what do you call it? Uh, Synesthesia. But then what happened is Grandin came out with the real diagnosis, and Grandin came out, and I had a very fascinating conversation, right? And Grandin's like, you have gestalt perception. I'm like, who? Like salt? Too much salt? No, you have gestalt perception. And so you start to think about it. So that is what got me an award-winning dissertation. The fact that I am an individual, I have an enhanced ability to perceive the whole rather than the individual details. See, that's me. I also, when you speak, every word you speak has color. But you see, we're all different. How have you gotten past and helped reverse the conversation that we're different and less than to we're different and we're not less than?
That's a really great question. I think sometimes I still struggle. I definitely have to mask a lot in my current profession. I don't think that I get offered as much grace, especially being like a medical provider.
Mm,
However, I would say being on the autism spectrum is what makes me the most profound provider, with my ability to recognize patterns, see trends over a group of people. But I would say Ugh, I think I just try to do it every day by getting up and advocating for people and just showing up for myself. I mean, I'm always constantly trying to not prove to myself, but just show myself, shine, you're fine. You're doing okay. It's okay if you're doing it different. But I definitely catch a decent amount of grief for the way
yeah.
operate.
I'm going to blame Dr. Noto on that. I'm just going to be like, okay, Dr. Noto made me talk about it. But it was a long time coming conversation for me. It was not easy to really be on a show like this and a show like hers and be that, out there. And then when people hear the show, he said, what's a big deal? We knew. We knew,
Yeah.
Pat.
You've been telling everybody all along. I just made you just, it was a little bit like standing up at an AA meeting. Instead of standing up at the AA meeting and saying, hi, I'm so and so, and this is my addiction, I got you to stand up at a different meeting of A's. But I think part of the challenge, especially as one engages with women on the autism spectrum, especially women that are doing well in the world, because my experience with folks with autism is I either had females who were like in a corner with a blanket over their head, who were very profoundly impacted by their autism, or it was folks more like Cheyenne. There's there's not as much middle in my experiences of women on the spectrum as there are men. There's like a whole array of men in all different, areas, but it seems like folks expect, well, if you're out there, you're functioning, you're not doing some of those things, you're not self-stimming, you're not doing this, other things, but I hear the women talk more frequently about masking. And I don't know whether that's a women thing, period. That all of us sort of pretend sometimes to be in situations that we don't want to be in and we're acting like it's just fine or whatever, or whether whether part of it is sort of connected in there. But I do think, overall, we're not really great at letting women be who women are,
For
with or
sure.
without neurodiversity.
Yeah, I have to give a lot of thanks to a movie that's out, a part two of a movie. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention it, but part one of the movie was so insightful for me. And I watched the character that Ben Affleck played in the movie, and I said, "Yep, that's me. Oh, that's what? Oh, what's he doing? Oh, okay, that. Yep, yep. Why you got the music?" So, and you start to see things differently. But if we're not going to talk about it, and Cheyenne, thank you for your story, and you, Dr. Noto, what are we doing with it? What are we doing with the conversation, I guess, right?
Yeah. And in my opinion, the more that we open up the conversations about how we're all different in a whole array of ways, that I think acceptance across the board is hopefully going to get better. Because to me, diversity is a whole bunch of things. I think Dr. Pat and I had a conversation, maybe one of the first times that she and I met, about how when I was at the university, I was trying to explain to somebody that our department was diverse because we had several people who were over the age of 70, a couple of people who were multilingual, and a few other things. And they went, no, only one person is diverse. And I was like, well, what do you mean? All these people are diverse. And they're like, no, no, just the guy who came from Africa. He's the only one who's diverse. And I was just like, well, that's just the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. But, for the purposes of this report that was getting done, apparently that was what it was. But, we the more we learn to see what everybody brings to the table and the contributions that each individual brings, the more hopefully as a society overall we are better at welcoming a variety of individuals. um Cheyenne, I want to ask you, I think I might know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So who was your champion? Did you have some folks that really made a difference for you, people who you knew saw you for who you were, even when you weren't quite certain what was going on?
For sure. I mean, my family has always stood by me, and my mom was there when I was having those panic attacks and couldn't stand. And I think of when you say, I am someone who kind of shows myself off, but I definitely hide a lot of the bad days. I don't show people when I'm under the covers because I it's tough. Like people judge you when they see you down.
Hmm.
And so I definitely think like people are probably just not being feeling as easy sharing those things. And I think, especially in my profession, I have to be strong for most of my patients on a regular basis. And not that I have to have it going on, but I think it helps them to have more trust in me. So I definitely think I safeguard that. But yeah, my mom was huge when I was getting diagnosed, and my family and just how they supported me, my dad and my sister. And then realistically, Drew, having an amazing partner matters so much. Like, I've had, partners, in my life who didn't really support me and more kind of exacerbated some of those, needing of like your love languages. So having that verbal confirmation and affirmation for me has allowed me, and then just like unconditional love, having those people in your life that really shower you and just encourage you are so important for you to feel strong, because if not, this world is tough. And I think it's a lot of tough for people on the spectrum or even neurodivergent people, because we feel that emotions just like so powerful. So you have really big highs and you have some really big lows, and surrounding yourself with a cushion of people who love you no matter what emotion you're having is, for me, has been like life changing. So shout out to my family and Drew for
Mm.
everything they've done to support me.
Yeah,
Uh,
ditto on all of that. I'm telling you that. I'm
yeah,
not sure I'd be here if it wasn't for what you just said.
yeah. I saw the nose of not the well, I saw the nose of a little one, but I also saw the nose of a bigger guy. Could will he get in the screen?
He might. Dax, come here. Dax, come. He's coming. He's my service dog. Super blessed. I don't think I would be also another great fuzzy guy who's
Oh,
offered so much support. He's actually from Seattle, Washington, upstate. He's a golden doodle. His name is Dax, and he is
mhm.
5. And he comes to work with me, which has been extraordinary, especially like during COVID when that was some tough times. And he, is able to smell cortisol, and he provides deep pressure therapy and also
Yeah.
like tick intervention, especially if they were more like self-harm behaviors.
Mhm. Yeah. Can I ask you a question about that? Because this is something we don't talk about enough, and that is what have you both found are the resources now available to people that weren't? I mean, I went through like you, Lyme disease. I have no sense of smell. Somebody told me that I should get a service dog, and I just looked at him and said, I don't think I'm eligible. And I don't think we understand everything that's available. We just assume, since most of our life it wasn't available, that things are not available, but you both are changing that, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, there's a variety of folks that fit the criteria for a service dog. It's no longer just folks with blindness or visual impairments. I mean, they
Mhm.
open the door for everybody, but um, there's lots of reasons why folks would have a service dog. Sometimes folks have them because they recognize when somebody's having a seizure. They may recognize when somebody's blood sugar level is going down really low. Dax is really good at recognizing anxiety and, a need for somebody to kind of ground themselves. I think the unfortunate thing is that there are a number of people who have decided that they would like to bring just their regular dog to a whole bunch of places that their regular dog has no business going to and is not trained appropriately to go. And they get themselves on the internet and they, get a piece of paper and then they say, well, I can bring this dog because this dog is a service dog. And when they're really not. And I think that's created a bit of a challenge for folks who really truly have service dogs and who really need service dogs. And I would suspect that there probably are times that because Cheyenne does not have a visual challenge, that people are like, well, what do you got him for?
For sure.
Yeah.
You are not
Um,
wrong on that. And I think it's tough to know, but I think the internet is a great resource. I think, as we, being able to like look up stuff on like has always been a good idea. And just like kind of being able to confirm resources has always been helpful. And collaborating with other people, like if I see someone that has done something that I have, I mean, again, there's not a lot of support for adults getting diagnosed, especially women who are late diagnosed. I mean, I think there's a couple places. I think knowing that you could get a diagnosis through a psychiatrist is helpful, as if they know you and can, offer some of that insight. You don't necessarily have to go through, a lot of the psychological testing. Um, And I think, in Connecticut, the autism, oh, what is it called? I've done a couple research studies there.
The group at Yale?
I think it's in Hartford, and they
Oh,
have
okay.
a pretty
Yeah, I'm not
lovely
gonna come up with it.
resources.
Yeah.
I can't think
Uh,
of their name, but on their website, they have a lot of resources, and you could just call, and a lot of times they'll help you, just figure out what you might need and offer. They've always been very kind to me.
So I'm gonna ask you one other question. And I want to know what do you do to kind of restore and renew and rejuvenate yourself when you're starting to feel like everything else is sort of taking all the energy out.
Probably a couple things. I think a big thing is my faith, for sure. Believing in something higher than myself has really helped me feel that I've always felt like something greater than myself has put me on this earth to help. And not even in like I'm better than anybody, just like I truly believe that the gifts and talents that I've been given were provided to help other people. So my faith definitely helps. I would say being in nature always helps me de-wind. Being away from just like disconnecting really helps me connect. Um,
Mhm.
the sunshine usually helps. And always listening to just good music or breathing. A lot of that stuff is just taking time to slow down because a lot of times this world is pushing us out of rhythm. And sometimes we just need to slow down, switch gears, and you can usually figure anything out.
Yeah. And I think many people don't know how to slow down. I mean, across the board, all kinds of folks have no ability to sort of put the brakes on. And partially because when you put the brakes on and you stop and it's quiet, then you have to figure out what's going on in your head. But if you just keep going a million miles an hour, you don't have to listen to any of those things. But so is there anything, if I could send you back, which maybe isn't really that far away because you're not quite that old, that some of those folks might still be there. But if I sent you back to some of the schools that you went to and you had the opportunity to tell some of the folks that you went to school with or the teachers that you interacted with, um, something that you think would be useful for students coming up, or to even say to them, hey, you were nice to me and you understood me and I appreciated that. Is there any of that in your K to 12 experience, or was it all pretty
I mean,
stressful?
I was blessed because I did go to a magnet school for singing. And so theater was always a way to get out of my body. If my skin wasn't working, that helped. So I was offered a lot of grace when I was able to be around other people because honestly, everybody was weird, I guess, if you wanted to. Everyone was just an individual and just yourself and they didn't care. But when I was in regular high school, rough, 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 rough. Just a lot of bullying and just like not even if it was just like lighthearted, it just didn't feel good. And like interpreting sarcasm was never easy for me. But I think my advice would be it gets better. Perspective is amazing. I mean, in practice helps you. I mean, failure isn't like your last attempt at something. It really is just truly your first attempt in learning. And I think holding myself and giving myself grace, because I think I was always the one who was much harder on myself as well. And so I would encourage people to just be nice and kind to yourself and, realize that life is about learning and it usually ends up being okay.
Good point. I would encourage folks that if they really are not feeling like they have that within themselves, to please find someone to talk to reach out to a teacher, to a parent, to a pastor, to your next door neighbor, to a hotline if that is something that you need to do. Because the other thing that worries me is the number of folks within the community who are feeling that they have no hope and that are dying by suicide. And it's a very frightening number.
It is, and I encourage people because I wouldn't tell you I mean, being truthful, that has been a part of my past, and I have been in hospitals in the past when I felt like the ceiling was falling and I couldn't catch my breath. But I think, you know, that's why and that stuff is hard to talk about. Like, when people ask you why you have a service dog for self-harm, like, that's hard because I present myself as so different, but I think, it can get better, and I think it's good to have those supports and have someone nice that you like to talk to, because I
Yeah.
do really be appreciating my therapist too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so if somebody does find that they don't have a spot um, in their current world to engage with somebody to talk, I am happy to do that with folks if they think that I could be of assistance to them. So I'll give you a couple ways that you can connect with me. And one of them is through my website, which is notoholisticconsulting.com. And the other possibility is to just send me an email directly at notoconsulting2002@gmail.com. I am actually trained to do life coaching with folks who are neurodiverse, so I'm more than happy to be of assistance to somebody if that is something that I can do. So, Chyenne, thank you so much for coming and visiting with us. I have a feeling that you may turn out to be a frequent flyer. I suspect that we have many other things that we could probably continue to talk about. I think that at some point in time, maybe a future visit where we really talk about some of the functional medicine and alternative approaches, I would say alternative holistic approaches that you're using in your practice would be of interest to our listeners. So we'll schedule another time in the future. I'm pretty confident of that.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you so much for what you guys are doing. Just listening to your previous episodes, this, when I think back at the question, this is the type of stuff that helps people feel more comfortable. It's the conversation that gets started. So thank you for you two ladies for stepping up and, filling a gap, because that's what we need. And so I appreciate it. And thank you so much for having on this show.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. Join me, Dr. Lori, on Transformation Talk Radio every second and fourth Monday at 11:30 Pacific Time as we continue to explore navigating a world not designed for diversity. For advocacy and support for individuals with disabilities, let's connect. Learn more about consulting and life coaching at notoholisticconsulting.com.